3 rounds versus 5 rounds is a different atmosphere. And while the fight may be the same in that the weight class, the opponent, and the rules are all going to be contested equally, the rounds is significantly different. Let me give you an example. Vitor Belfort, who is somebody that was on my mind from day one. On my mind because I was a fan. He was my mother's favorite fighter. But also on my mind because Randy Couture fought him multiple times. Dan Henderson fought him multiple times. Matt Lindland fought him. So when my teammates are going through this, I'm thinking every 5 or 6 months, I'm thinking about Vitor. And Vitor had a statistic. Now, this is an old statistic. This will take you back as far as 2008, 2009. This is when he was in affliction and Matt Lindland was getting ready to fight him. But I had studied Vitor very closely. And at that time, off the top of my head, so give me a little room here, but it was either that Vitor had never won a fight that he hadn't won in the first round, or it was that he had only won one fight that he didn't win in the first round. He had never been to a decision and won, but he had never even been to the third round and won. He also, within the first round of the fights that he won, he also had to beat you within the first half of the very first round. Now, what that will tell you based on the numbers is just, look, he's a fast starter. He's fast, he's explosive, and that speed and that explosiveness will catch you by surprise if you're not ready, and possibly will also tell you that some of those things will diminish as the fight goes on. That's fine. No part of that is a knock on Vitor. It's a celebration of Vitor, but it's also something you need to be aware of with Vitor should you be the opponent. I bring that to you because not everybody's made for 5 rounds. The sport changed when it went to 5 rounds. That is something that you could discuss, should be revisited. It was very arbitrary how we came up with that number, but at either point, you are discussing something different. And it starts with training. How are you going to approach a 3-round fight versus a 5-round fight? And for many guys, they're finishers. Robbie Lawler, by example, doesn't give a damn how many rounds you're going to put on it. He's coming out, he's putting his foot down, he's looking to get your ass out of there. Many guys fight that way. And they perhaps wouldn't fall into the category of somebody that needed to strategize or change strategies on 3 versus 5. But for most athletes, they will go into a contest, and their biggest fear is not the outcome of the contest. Their biggest fear is not losing. It is reaching exhaustion, getting to a level of fatigue where you can no longer protect yourself. And that is the single point that will add to an athlete's confidence. If an athlete ever tells you he's confident, it has nothing to do with the skills or the experience or the speed or the strength of his opponent. It has to do with, I believe if the end of the night presents itself, I can still be here more than he can. If you believe that, you will have confidence, and there is nothing else that will give an athlete confidence. That's ultimately what it comes down to. So now, how are you going to train different? Well, all of the obvious things. You're going to run a little bit more. And instead of sparring 3 rounds like most of the gym does, once the sparring's over, you're going to stay in there and 2 more guys are going to come in on you. You're going to get ready for 5 rounds. And the real key to the sport, a key to the sport, is to make sure that training is more difficult than the event itself. That's for any sport. If you can train harder than the actual competition, you're going to have a major leg up. That's where you can start to be relaxed and not to feel some of those pressures. I always use the example of the Brian Stans, Brian Foster, Tim Kennedys of the world, military men who had grenades thrown at them, who had tanks shooting at them. You wonder why they're so calm walking into unarmed combat, which for the average person would be the most stressful thing you ever did. And for good reason, and a rare thing to do. But for them, no big. You're telling me this guy's got no weapons? He's got no friends hiding in the bushes for sure? You're sure about that? I don't have a scope pointed at me that I have to worry about. You're sure? Wow. Okay. Right. You see where it's a very different thing, but that becomes a very real thing. So if you can train in a way that is more difficult than what you have to go into, now that becomes a little bit hard when you're fighting for 5 rounds. You only have so much energy. What are you going to do? Spar 8 rounds? So that 5 becomes easier? Look, you're going to spar for 40 minutes? It's just one of these ridiculously difficult things to prepare for. So largely it comes down to mindset. Am I tough enough to do this? Am I physically in shape? Well, that peaks out at some point. If you run 5 miles every day to get in shape, you go, well, I just want to be in better shape, so now I'm going to start running 6. Well, it doesn't really work that way. If you're putting out 5 at a good output, little bit of an incline, at some point your conditioning does top out. Same with strength. You could go years in the weight room and do everything right, and those numbers, you just don't start to get those same personal bests that you do. At some point, you top out. You will absolutely have a peak conditioning that you can never beat. So what do you do if that's 15 minutes, but now you're in a 5-round fight? Well, now it becomes a mental battle. I think that Conor McGregor might have been the one that really showed us that. He came out after his loss to Nate Diaz and said, I was not efficient with my energy. He then rescheduled a fight with Nate Diaz. He changed his output. He extended those 15 minutes over 25 minutes. I mean, I would offer that to you as an example because it's one that you'll know. It's one that you can relate to, but that was done up here. Conor didn't train differently. He didn't prepare differently. He didn't eat differently. He didn't do these things, but he got himself ready up here. He now understood what he had to go into. He changed a little bit of that strategy. And I will argue for you, there's a number of fights that we have seen over time that the winner of a 3-round contest would not have been the winner had that been 5 rounds. We've seen a number of times contests that win all 5 rounds, but if we would have stopped it at 3, we had a totally different outcome. Most recent example, Reyes versus John Jones. Just example fight that you guys would know. Had that only been a 3-round fight, right? You see how it would go. But it's a real thing. It's something that you have to deal with. It's something that you have to prepare for. And why many people believe that you have to prepare physically for that, and they're right. That's a piece of the pie. We do need to go back to what Conor talked about, where we need to strategize. How are we going to do this? Where in the contest are we going to find those breathers? What positions do I need to see this fight in where I can get those breathers? Because I am a human being after all. And this is almost a superhuman atmosphere. So I will tell you, yes, physically, you've got to do a lot of things right, but you also do need to mentally know what you're getting into.